Take a seat.
What do you think of Singapore being such a small economic base, small population? So remember when we were kicked out from Malaysia, they thought that we would go back and kowtow to them and ask them to take us back because we don't have the economic hinterland. So now with internet, the whole world is our internet.
Yeah.
So what your view is thinking?
Does it matter that we're small?
Well, as Professor Linda Lim has provocatively put it, says, why do you keep on saying that Singapore is small? Singapore is not small. Now, let me go back to another story, and that is, I started by saying how powerful and how potent the OHQs are in Singapore. On one occasion, I went to see somebody that, David, you might know, George Conrades. George Conrades will run IBM. And I was chasing George Conrades, to do a computer investment in Singapore. Of course, IBM at that time, was very arrogant. When I asked him, to consider doing a computer plant in Singapore, he said, well, IBM doesn't do PCs. IBM doesn't do PCs. That was during the time when Apple did PCs, and IBM didn't do. But anyway, he says, I'm in Australia. I have a manufacturing plant in Singapore, but he says, I'm very pro-Singapore. And he mentioned that he went to school, Ohio Wesleyan University, with Jonathan's brother, and he was a member of the jazz band, at Ohio Wesleyan. So I say, well, what do you do in Singapore? He says, I have an IPO, not initial public offering, but International Purchasing Office in Singapore. As part of your OHQ, I have an IPO. So I say, what does your IPO do? Well, my IPO buys from venture, my IPO buys, from all your local SMEs. And because of my purchases from them, they grow. They, in turn, the SMEs grows. So I say, George, what is the size of your purchases? And he almost made me fall off my chair. He said, $200 million a year. So if one OHQ IPO in Singapore buys $200 million worth of products and services, then, from people like Wong It Leong, from people like maybe even, the Koh Boon Hui's, companies and all the rest of it, that would be the most potent force for actually, bootstrapping your SMEs. And that will bootstrap an IBM $200 billion purchase through the IPO in Singapore will bootstrap more SMEs in Singapore and allow them to do more social function than any government agency, with due respect to my friend Poon Chong Boon, who runs Spring and Suan Yang.
No doubt. You always need the mothership to start up all the other fledglings. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've spent about an hour and a half, a bit more than an hour and a half, picking the mind of Chan Chin Bock. And I think we come away perhaps with 2 or 3 things. One, we all recognize that Mr. Chan has a prodigious memory and he remembers the smallest details. And as you can tell, he lives up to his reputation of being able to spin the story, and if nothing else, he will wear you out with a story, but you'll get your investment. But I think we've also developed some insights into how EDB and Singapore has been successful. The enduring qualities that make us, that give us the ability to adapt even as the world around us changes. And these are deep capabilities in our institutions, like our tripartism, in our quality of people, which is not just about perhaps just the top 1 or 2 people, or the chairman of a board, or even the ministers in the cabinet, but broadly the capability of the people. And also, and perhaps something that we take for granted, our ability to integrate and bring new ideas within the fold, and to mix it up with our existing capabilities and stay relevant to the rest of the world. So at the end of the day, it's still all about people. So, Chin Bock, I want to ask you one last question, but I want you to do the impossible for me. And that is, I want you to answer this in 3 sentences or less. So you think about the question, and 3 sentences or less. The world is changing, as so many people have written in and made the point. And the question is that we have the question is, how do we change with it? Certainly, size is, as Mr. Tan, you have pointed out, not such a big factor anymore. We have survived despite our small size all these 40, 50 years. And there's no reason why we can't start something that can become global. I kick myself for not thinking about Twitter. I just got introduced to Twitter recently. It's a very silly idea. That's why I don't think I'll ever come up with it. And yet lots of people use it. Who would imagine that other people want to know what I'm doing? And why would I want to tell anybody? And yet there are millions of subscribers, and people use it in all kinds of interesting ways. A bakery uses it to tell you when their bread is ready. Fathers use it to track where their daughters are, provided their daughters tell them. But if you want the world to know, there is now a new communication channel, and it's an idea that works anywhere in the world. So the question I have for you, Mr. Chan, is not one of staying relevant anymore, because I think you've given us some insights on how we do stay relevant. The question I have for you is, what advice would you give to a young officer today, somebody contemplating joining the EDB, or maybe an MNC, or starting his own company, but not sure what to do? What advice would you give that young person today, in 3 sentences or less?
I can give you a reply, but I'm not sure that it will be in 3 sentences.
That's vintage.
But this is a very interesting story. When Philip Yeo came and took pity on me and said, "You're running all over the US and the world by yourself. I'm going to send you some people." He sent both long-term and short-term people. Long-term people consisted of people like yourself, Swan Hyang and others, and short-term people consisted of people like Yong Si, And Yong Si came, and one day I took Yong Si with me to go and see Mobile Refinery, in 42nd Street in New York, where they are headquartered, because they were considering an expansion. So after our meeting with Mobile, Yong Si and I walked back down Park Avenue, and he saw to the left of him and to the right of him all the skyscrapers in Park Avenue, all the skyscrapers, and in front of him, because between the Grand Central Station and 59th Street where EDB was, it's just chock full with skyscrapers. So I was very curious. In a way, this is a story that ends up with John Ting's question, because John Ting is a past president of the Architect Society of Singapore, and a loyal supporter of all our EDB Society functions.
Yes, he is.
So I asked Yong Si, I say, "Yong Si, what does this walk tell you? What impression do you have from this walk on Park Avenue with me?" Well, he looked at me and he said, "Wow, the power that must be in all those buildings." Yong Si said, the power which is in all of those buildings. And of course, today we'll do the same walk down Park Avenue. You will not think about power, because, the bottom has fallen off.
You might have to watch out for jumping bodies.
Huh? Yeah.
No, just kidding.
But, to switch it back, supposing that walk that I made with Yong Si was not in Park Avenue in New York, was in Tokyo. Suppose we had that walk in Tokyo, and we were going through Shinjuku, Marunouchi, Shinagawa, and all, Roppongi, and all those places and all that. And we were seeing all those skyscrapers built by friends of John Ting and company and so on. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story is that when you walk through that, that Japanese, route, what you see the towers. But unlike the New York skyscrapers, which are rigid, the Tokyo skyscrapers are resilient. They are absolutely resilient. They are built actually to take the forces of the earthquakes, because Tokyo sits, on a ring of fire. All the tectonic plates under Tokyo can cause an earthquake anytime. So every one of the buildings has got resilience. So the answer actually is this, you see, that it's very easy for us, in Singapore or anywhere else, actually to always be resistant to new ideas. It is a natural thing to be resistant, but it takes a lot of effort to be resilient, and we must work on it.
So, well, there you have it. In his own inimitable way that none of us can replicate. And thankfully, not all of us adopt the same method. And yet, Mr. Chan has shared with us, through these stories, how simple observations, simple events, but with a creative mind applying thought to those events and observations, can result in so much good for the economy and for society. And I think this has been Chin Bock's contribution to Singapore these last 45 years since he joined the EDB. And we thank him for spending this afternoon with us. And we thank him and salute his contributions to Singapore all these last 4.5 decades. So join me once again to thank Mr. Chan. Chin Bock, thanks very much. I hope I wasn't too terse with you.
Yeah, okay.
Xuan Hyang, you have to close it.
Take a seat.